Historical Stories for Sleep, Volume 5, Gentle Dusk's Embrace. Section 1, Introduction and the Gentle Settling. Welcome once more, cherished traveler, to this threshold space where day releases its hold and night extends its invitation. As you settle now into perfect comfort, as your body finds its natural resting position, as each breath carries you deeper into relaxation, know that you are joining the eternal rhythm of all working hands that have ever set down their tools at evening's approach, all busy minds that have ever quieted as darkness gathered, all tired bodies that have ever surrendered to the blessed relief of rest. Breathe deeply now, drawing air slowly into your lungs, feeling your chest expand, your belly rise, life itself entering and filling you. Hold that fullness for just a moment, experiencing the pause, the stillness between movements. And now release, letting the breath flow out with a gentle sigh, feeling your body soften and settle as the air departs. Once more, breathe in peace and quiet. Hold, and breathe out effort and tension. One final time, breathing in the sacred stillness of this moment, and breathing out all that you carried through the day. Your body knows how to rest. It has done this countless times, surrendering to sleep's embrace every night of your life. Trust this ancient wisdom that lives in every cell, that requires no thought or effort, that simply waits for you to stop resisting, stop planning, stop doing, and allow the natural process of rest to unfold in its own perfect timing. Feel your body now, heavy and relaxed, sinking deeper with each breath. Your head rests completely on its pillow, the weight of your skull fully surrendered. Your face softens, all the tiny muscles that hold expressions throughout the day now releasing, smoothing, becoming peaceful as still water. Your jaw hangs loose, your tongue rests quietly, your eyes are closed or closing, the lids heavy as stones, still as earth. Your shoulders drop away from your ears, all that accumulated tension flowing downward and away like water seeking its level. Your arms lie peacefully wherever they have settled, requiring no effort, no attention, simply resting in perfect stillness. Your hands are open or gently curled, your fingers relaxed and natural. Your chest and belly soften with each breath, rising and falling in that eternal rhythm that has measured your life since your first moment and will continue until your last. Your back spreads wide against the surface that supports you, each vertebra releasing, the whole spine settling into effortless alignment. Your hips rest heavily, your legs are loose and limp, your feet completely relaxed, all the small bones and muscles that carried you through the day now surrendering to gravity's gentle pull. Tonight, we journey once more through history's vast tapestry, but our destinations will be places of daily craft and evening ritual, of work completed and rest earned. We will stand beside bakers and druids, poets and alchemists, dancers and calligraphers, people whose lives were shaped by the patient repetition of skilled work, by the satisfaction of tasks well done, by the evening transition from labor to rest that gives structure and meaning to human days. In ancient Sumer, in the world's first true city, we will watch a baker remove the last loaves from clay ovens, the smell of barley bread filling the evening air. In Celtic Britain, we will stand with a druid in a sacred grove as sunset transforms ancient oaks into pillars of gold. In Heian, Japan, we will sit with a court lady composing poetry by lamplight, each character a work of art. In medieval Andalusia, we will observe an alchemist tending his furnaces, seeking transformation both chemical and spiritual. At Angkor Wat, we will watch a temple dancer complete her evening devotions through sacred movement. In Ottoman Istanbul, we will stand beside a master calligrapher perfecting the divine art of beautiful writing. Each of these people found meaning in daily practice, in the patient repetition of skilled work, in the evening satisfaction of knowing they had contributed their particular gift to the great human enterprise of creating beauty, maintaining tradition, serving community, and seeking truth. Their work was not separate from their lives, but was the very substance of their lives, giving each day purpose and structure, connecting them to lineages of craftspeople who came before and would come after. As we journey together, you may notice your thoughts becoming slower, fewer, more distant, like birds flying across a vast empty sky, appearing for a moment, then disappearing beyond the horizon. This is natural and welcome. The thinking mind is preparing to rest, loosening its constant grip on attention, allowing deeper levels of consciousness to emerge. If you drift into sleep before our journey ends, that is perfect. The stories will continue their work in those deeper places, guiding you gently into the most restorative rest you have known. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to accomplish, no moment but this one stretching out before you like an endless shore where gentle waves lap in perfect rhythm, eternal and soothing. You are safe, you are comfortable, you are held by this moment and this place. The only invitation is to listen, to imagine, and to allow yourself gradually, gently, inevitably to drift toward the blessed darkness of sleep. Let us begin our journey in ancient Sumer, in the land between two rivers, where human civilization first learned to organize itself into cities, to write on clay, to build temples that reached toward heaven. The sun is setting over Uruk, the great city of King Gilgamesh, and we find ourselves in a baker's workshop where the day's final loaves are emerging from ovens that have been hot since before dawn, filling the evening air with the fundamental scent of baked bread that has comforted humanity for thousands of years. Section 2. Ancient Sumer, Baker's Workshop, 2800 BCE. The heat of the day is finally breaking as evening approaches, though inside the baker's workshop the temperature remains fierce, the clay ovens radiating warmth that makes the air shimmer and wave. Enlil Bani, whose name means Enlil is the creator, uses a long wooden paddle to remove the last round loaves from the oven's depths, their crusts golden brown, their surfaces marked with the pattern of the reed mat on which they rose. He is 45 years old, his arms strong from years of kneading dough, his face perpetually flushed from the heat of ovens, his hands calloused and scarred from occasional burns, marks of his trade. The workshop is built of mud brick like all structures in Uruk, its walls thick to insulate against the Mesopotamian heat, its roof supported by date palm logs. The ovens themselves are massive constructions of clay, beehive-shaped, heated by burning dried reeds and date palm fronds until the clay walls glow with stored heat. The bread bakes from this radiant heat, emerging with a crust that is crisp and flavorful, an interior that is soft and satisfying. Enlil Bani has been baking since before dawn, as he does every day, beginning work in darkness to have bread ready when the city wakes. He has mixed and kneaded hundreds of pounds of dough, shaped it into loaves, let them rise, bake them in sequence throughout the day. Some of the bread will go to the temple of Inanna as offerings, ensuring the goddess's favor on the city. Some will feed the palace workers and bureaucrats who manage the city's complex affairs. Most will be sold in the market to ordinary citizens, traded for other goods, sustaining the population of perhaps 50,000 people who make Uruk the largest city in the world. The barley flour he uses is ground from grain grown in fields irrigated by canals that channel water from the Euphrates, the great river that gives life to this otherwise arid land. The grinding is done by workers who spend their days pushing stones in circles, crushing grain between millstones, producing flour that still contains pieces of stone that wear down people's teeth. This is the price of civilization, Enlil Bani reflects. That bread, the staff of life, also brings its hardships, its challenges, its trade-offs between benefit and cost. As the last loaves emerge from the oven, Enlil Bani sets them on reed mats to cool, arranging them in rows that will be counted and recorded by the scribe who tracks the workshop's production. Everything in Sumer is counted and recorded: production, consumption, taxes, rations. The invention of writing just a few centuries ago has transformed society, allowing complex organization, long-distance trade, the preservation of laws and stories and knowledge. The cuneiform tablets stacked in the temple archives represent a new kind of human memory, external and permanent, transcending individual lives and deaths. Enlil Bani's assistant, a young man learning the baker's trade, begins the evening cleaning, scraping dried dough from the kneading tables, washing the wooden bowls and paddles, sweeping flour dust from the floor. The work is never truly finished, for tomorrow will bring another dawn, another batch of dough, another day of baking. But the day's production is complete, and that brings its own satisfaction, the sense of work well done, of bread made, of people fed. The sun touches the western horizon, visible through the workshop's doorway, its light turning the mud brick walls of Uruk golden, transforming the great ziggurat of Inanna into a mountain of fire. The city is settling into evening routines, markets closing, workers returning home, families gathering for meals, children being called in from the streets. The sounds of the city change, the daytime bustle giving way to a softer evening murmur, voices and laughter, the occasional bleat of a goat, the distant music of a lute player. And Lil Bonnie removes his work tunic, washes his face and arms in a basin of water, feeling the day's flower dust rinse away, the heat gradually leaving his skin. He dresses in a clean kilt and drapes a wool shawl over his shoulders. The evenings can be cool, especially as summer turns to autumn. He takes his payment for the day in bread and a small amount of silver, tucking them into a leather pouch that hangs from his belt. Walking through the streets toward his home, he passes the massive walls that protect Uruk from enemies, walls so thick that chariots can race along their tops. He passes houses of baked brick where wealthy merchants live, and smaller mud brick dwellings where craftspeople and workers make their homes. He passes temples where priests are preparing evening sacrifices, where lamps are being lit to honor the gods who control the forces that determine human fate. Anu, the sky god, Enlil, god of storms, Enki, god of wisdom and water, Inanna, goddess of love and war. His own home is modest but adequate, a compound shared with his extended family, his wife and 3 children, his brother's family, his elderly mother. They gather in the courtyard as darkness deepens, eating together, bread fresh from his ovens, onions and lentils, dates and dried fish, beer made from fermented barley, that beverage that makes hard work bearable, that turns water into something nourishing and slightly intoxicating, that the Sumerians consider a gift from the gods. After eating, Enlil Bonnie sits in the courtyard enjoying the cool evening breeze, listening to his children's chatter, his wife's gentle voice, his mother's stories of the old days when she was young. This is what he works for, he reflects, not wealth or status, for bakers occupy a middle position in Sumerian society, neither privileged nor impoverished. He works for this, the daily bread, the family gathered, the sense of contributing to the great collective enterprise of the city, of feeding people, of sustaining life through his labor. The stars emerge, brilliant in the clear desert sky. The Sumerians are accomplished astronomers, have named the constellations, tracked the movements of planets, understand that celestial events correlate with earthly ones. Enlil Bonnie is not educated in such matters. He cannot read or write, has never studied the stars, but he knows the sky in a different way, through direct observation, through the practical knowledge of when seasons change, when floods will come, when it is time to plant or harvest. His mother retires to her sleeping room, and gradually the children are sent to bed, their protests growing weaker as tiredness overtakes them. Enlil Bonnie and his wife sit together in companionable silence, their long marriage requiring few words to maintain its warmth. They have raised children together, endured difficult times, celebrated joys, grown old in each other's company. This partnership, too, is part of what gives his life meaning. Not a romantic passion, but something deeper and more durable, a shared life built on mutual support and affection. Finally, he rises and enters his sleeping room, a small chamber with woven reed mats on the floor, a low platform covered with blankets. He lies down, feeling the day's tiredness settling into his muscles, into his bones. The work of a baker is physically demanding, the constant standing, the heavy lifting of flour sacks and dough, the heat of the ovens. But it is good work, honest work, necessary work. People need bread. He makes bread. This simple equation gives his life a clarity and purpose that he values above any grand ambition. Through the small window, he can see a rectangle of star-filled sky. He murmurs a brief prayer to Enlil, the god for whom he is named, asking for health and prosperity, for protection of his family, for another day of work tomorrow. The prayer is brief and formulaic, not deeply mystical, but sincere in its way, a recognition that forces beyond human control shape events, that humility before the divine is wisdom. Sleep comes easily, bringing dreams of endless loaves emerging from ovens, of bread rising and baking, of the satisfying rhythm of work that fills days and gives them structure. In his dreams, the bread he bakes feeds not just Uruk, but the whole world, an infinite supply flowing from his ovens, nourishing all people, sustaining life itself. The dream is peaceful, purposeful, reflecting his deep identification with his craft, his role, his contribution to the community that depends on bakers and farmers and all those who work to provide the fundamental necessities of life. Hashtag Section 3, Celtic Britain, Druid's Grove, 100 CE. The afternoon light slants through ancient oaks, transforming their massive trunks into pillars of gold, their branches into a ceiling of green gold leaves that move and whisper in the evening breeze. In the sacred grove where his people have gathered for ceremonies beyond memory, the druid Cathbad stands in contemplation, his white robes blending with the mist that rises from the stream running through the grove, his staff of ash wood planted firmly in the earth, his eyes closed as he listens to the voices of the land speaking in bird calls and rustling leaves, in water's murmur and wind's song. Cathbad is 68 years old, his beard long and white, his face deeply lined with decades of weather and wisdom, his body still strong enough for the long walks to distant groves, the days of standing during ceremonies, the requirements of his calling as keeper of oral tradition, as mediator between his people and the gods, as judge and counselor and teacher to the next generation of druids. He has spent his entire adult life in sacred service, learning first as a student for 20 years, memorizing thousands of verses, studying the movements of stars and seasons, understanding the properties of plants, mastering the complex web of law and custom that governs tribal life. The grove where he stands is ancient beyond reckoning, the oaks themselves hundreds of years old, their roots deep in earth that has witnessed countless generations of Celts gathering here for worship, for judgment, for the great seasonal festivals that mark the turning of the year. The Romans have conquered much of Britain, built their roads and towns and villas, imposed their law and language and gods. But here in the West, Celtic ways persist, and Druids still gather in sacred groves, still perform the old ceremonies, still keep alive the traditions that connect present to past, humans to the land, the visible world to the invisible realms. The sun is descending toward the horizon, and Cathbad is preparing for the evening ritual, the acknowledgement of day's ending, the greeting of night's beginning. This transition time is sacred, he believes, the threshold between light and darkness, between the manifest and the hidden, between ordinary consciousness and deeper awareness. The Celts recognize 4 great festivals marking the year's turning. Samhain when summer ends and winter begins, Imbolc when the first stirrings of spring appear, Beltane when summer truly arrives, and Lugnasad when harvest begins. But every day also has its transitions, its sacred moments when the veil grows thin. He begins the evening chant, his voice strong despite his years, rising and falling in the complex melodic patterns of Celtic sacred song. The words are in the old tongue, older even than the language his people speak in daily life. Words preserved through oral tradition, their meanings sometimes unclear even to him, but their power undiminished. The chant honors the setting sun, the growing darkness, the spirits of the grove, the ancestors whose bones rest in burial mounds dotting the landscape, the gods who manifest through natural forces, through thunder and rain, through growth and decay, through the eternal cycles of birth and death and rebirth. As he chants, he feels the grove responding, the trees seeming to lean closer, the stream's voice harmonizing with his own, the birds falling silent as if listening. This is not imagination, he knows, but a real phenomenon. The natural world is alive, aware in its own way, responsive to human attention and intention. The Druids understand what the Romans with their stone cities and written laws do not. That matter and spirit are not separate, but interpenetrating. That every oak and stream and stone contains consciousness. That the visible world is merely the surface of a deeper reality that can be accessed through ritual, through poetry, through the disciplined attention of trained awareness. The chant complete, Cathbad pours a libation of mead onto the earth at the base of the largest oak, an offering to the spirits of the grove, to the gods who dwell in sacred places, to the ancestors who watch over their descendants from the other world. The mead seeps into the earth, carrying the prayers and intentions of the living down to the roots, down to the hidden realm where all things are connected, where past and future meet in the eternal present. He sits on a moss-covered stone, resting, allowing his breathing to deepen and slow. The work of a druid is not physically demanding in the way of farming or warfare, but it requires a different kind of strength. The mental discipline to memorize vast amounts of material, the spiritual stamina to maintain awareness and intention during long ceremonies, the emotional resilience to counsel others through grief and fear, to judge disputes with wisdom and fairness, to hold the collective memory and identity of his people. The light continues to fade, and the grove transforms, becoming mysterious, otherworldly. Cathbad has spent many nights here, has witnessed strange phenomena that the Romans would dismiss as superstition, but which he knows to be genuine manifestations of the hidden powers. Lights moving between trees, voices speaking in the wind, the occasional appearance of beings from the other world. The Sidhi, the fair folk who live in hills and underwater, who sometimes interact with humans, who must be treated with respect and caution. Tonight, the grove is peaceful, no unusual phenomena manifesting, just the natural settling of a forest into night. Bats emerging to hunt insects, an owl calling from a distant tree, small creatures rustling in the undergrowth. Cathbad finds this ordinary magic just as profound as any supernatural display. The simple fact of life continuing, of ecosystems maintaining themselves, of the great web of being in which everything depends on everything else. He thinks about his people, about the challenges they face. The Romans bring order and prosperity, roads and trade, written law and professional administration. But they also bring disruption, the erosion of old ways, the temptation to abandon ancient gods for Roman ones, to forget the stories and traditions that define Celtic identity. Cathbad sees his role as resistance, not military resistance, for that is futile against Rome's legions, but cultural resistance, keeping alive the knowledge and practices that make his people who they are. The training of young druids is thus not merely education but cultural preservation, ensuring that the oral tradition continues unbroken, that someone will still know the genealogies and laws, the healing herbs and sacred sites, the proper times for ceremonies, and the correct way to perform them. Cathbad has trained dozens of students over his long career, has passed on what he knows, confident that the chain will not break, that druidic wisdom will survive even if it must adapt to changing circumstances. As full darkness settles over the grove, Cathbad rises and begins his walk home to the settlement where his people live, a cluster of round houses with thatched roofs, surrounded by fields and pastures. The path is familiar, his feet finding it automatically even in darkness. The Romans have built a road nearby, straight and paved, far superior to the winding Celtic paths. But Cathbad prefers the old ways, the paths that follow the contours of the land rather than imposing geometry upon it. His house, when he reaches it, is warm and welcoming, a peat fire burning in the central hearth, his wife stirring a pot of stew, his grandchildren playing near the fire under her watchful eye. He is blessed in his family, he knows. A wife who has supported his calling despite the demands it makes. Children who respect the traditions even as they navigate between Celtic and Roman worlds. Grandchildren who carry both heritages forward into an uncertain future. They eat together, sharing the simple food that sustains them. Barley porridge, vegetables from the garden, occasionally meat from sheep or pigs. The Celts are not wealthy by Roman standards, lack the luxuries that fill Roman villas, but they have what matters: food and shelter, community and tradition, connection to land and ancestors. These are riches that cannot be measured in gold or silver. After eating, Cathbad sits by the fire telling stories to his grandchildren, ancient tales of heroes and monsters, of quests and transformations, of the gods' interactions with humans. The stories are entertaining but also instructive, encoding moral lessons and cultural values, preserving history in the only form available to a preliterate people. The children listen with wide eyes, absorbing not just the plots but the cadences, the formulas, the ways of thinking that distinguish Celtic consciousness from Roman rationality. Finally, tiredness overtakes him, and he retires to the sleeping alcove at the rear of the house, separated from the main room by a woven partition. He lies down on a platform covered with furs and wool blankets, feeling the days walking in his legs, the standing during rituals in his back. He is growing old, he knows, will not have many more years of active service. But he has trained successors, has passed on what he knows, has fulfilled his obligation to the tradition that sustained him and that he in turn has sustained. Through a gap in the thatch, he can see stars, the same stars his ancestors observed, the same patterns that mark the seasons and guide travelers, the same celestial lights that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless human societies. The Celts will endure, he believes, even if they must adapt, even if they must incorporate Roman elements into their identity. The core will remain, the connection to land, the oral tradition, the sense of living within rather than upon nature, the awareness that the visible world is only part of reality. Sleep comes gently, bringing dreams of the sacred grove, of the ancient oaks that have stood for centuries and will stand for centuries more, of the stream that has flowed since time immemorial and will flow long after he is gone. In his dreams, he walks among the trees as a young man again, learning from his own teacher, memorizing the ancient verses, discovering the hidden paths between worlds. The dream is peaceful, suffused with green-gold light, echoing with bird song and the whisper of leaves, reminding him that his life has been well spent in service to powers greater than himself, in devotion to a tradition that transcends individual existence. ## Section 4. Heian, Japan. Court Lady's Chamber, 1000 CE. The last light of day filters through the paper screens of the chamber, transforming the translucent shoji into glowing panels of soft amber and rose. Lady Murasaki, not the famous author but a woman who shares that illustrious name, kneels at her low writing desk, brush poised above paper, considering the poem she wishes to compose, the perfect arrangement of syllables that will capture the subtle sadness of autumn evening, the awareness of impermanence that Japanese aesthetics call mono no aware, the pathos of things, the bittersweetness of beauty's transience. Lady Murasaki is 32 years old, a woman of refinement and education, serving as lady-in-waiting to an imperial consort in the palace at Heian-kyo, the city of peace and tranquility that will one day be called Kyoto. She has been trained since childhood in the arts considered essential for women of her class: poetry composition in Japanese, calligraphy that makes every character a work of art, music on the koto and biwa, the blending of incense, the selection of color combinations in the 12-layered robes worn by court ladies, the subtle communication through poetry that constitutes courtship in this world of rigid protocol and limited direct contact between men and women. The chamber where she sits is elegant in its simplicity, following aesthetic principles that value suggestion over statement, absence over presence, asymmetry over balance. The walls are plain, painted in soft colors that change with the seasons. The floor is covered with tatami mats woven from rush grass, their surface slightly yielding, their scent fresh and clean. The few furnishings are exquisite: the writing desk of polished paulownia wood, a standing screen painted with autumn grasses, a low cabinet holding writing materials and books, an incense burner releasing threads of fragrant smoke. Lady Murasaki has been composing poetry all afternoon, responding to verses sent to her by a gentleman of the court, a subtle exchange that may be the beginning of a romantic relationship or merely an exercise in wit and literary skill. The gentleman's poem compared her to the autumn moon, mysterious and beautiful. She must respond with something that acknowledges the compliment without seeming too eager, that demonstrates her literary sophistication without appearing boastful, that maintains the delicate balance of interest and reserve that courtship demands. She writes in flowing hiragana script, the syllabary developed for writing Japanese, which Chinese characters cannot adequately represent. The brush moves across the paper in fluid strokes, each character carefully formed but appearing effortless, natural, as if the words emerge spontaneously rather than through laborious craft. The paper itself is special, handmade from mulberry bark, its surface slightly textured, treated to receive ink without bleeding or feathering. The poem she creates follows the waka form, 5 lines of 5, 7, 5, 7, and 7 syllables. Though autumn's moon slash illuminates my chamber, slash its light is cold slash unlike the warmth I sense slash in your gracious words. It is a good poem, she judges, neither brilliant nor inadequate, maintaining the proper tone, advancing the relationship without presumption. She sets aside the poem to dry and turns her attention to preparing for the evening. The court will gather for musical entertainments, for poetry competitions, for the refined conversation that fills the hours of aristocratic life. She must select the appropriate robes, not too bright, which would be vulgar, not too somber, which would seem melancholy. She chooses a combination of pale pink underrobes graduating to deep plum in the outer layers, with a figured silk jacket in a pattern of falling leaves, an ensemble that harmonizes with the season and announces her taste and sensitivity. The changing of robes is a complex procedure requiring the assistance of her serving women, the careful arrangement of the multiple layers so that the colors show at collar and sleeves in the prescribed combinations. The complete costume weighs perhaps 20 kilograms, restricts movement to slow, gliding steps, makes spontaneous action impossible. But this restriction is itself aesthetic, encouraging the cultivation of inner refinement, of mental and emotional life rather than physical activity. Once dressed, Lady Murasaki sits before a bronze mirror, applying white powder to her face, blackening her teeth with iron dye, fashions that transform natural beauty into artifice, that create a mask-like perfection considered more beautiful than mere nature. Her eyebrows have been shaved and replaced with painted marks high on her forehead, another convention of court beauty. The result is a face that seems almost alien, stylized, more artwork than flesh. As evening deepens, she joins other ladies in an informal gathering before the formal entertainment begins. They sit together, hidden behind screens from any men who might pass, speaking in low voices, sharing poems, discussing the romantic intrigues that dominate court life, the endless maneuvering for position and favor that constitutes Heian politics. The conversation is witty and elusive, full of literary references, each woman demonstrating her education and taste through the skillful deployment of classical quotations. Incense burners are brought in, and the ladies participate in the elegant game of incense appreciation, kodu, the way of incense. Different blends are burned, and the ladies must identify the components, sandalwood and aloes wood, clove and camphor, each scent associated with seasons and emotions, with colors and poems. Lady Murasaki has studied incense blending, knows how to combine aromatic woods and resins to create subtle effects, can distinguish between dozens of varieties of aloes wood by their fragrance alone. The game complete, the ladies make their way to the main hall where musicians are tuning their instruments, preparing for the evening's performance. Lady Murasaki's role will be to listen attentively, to compose appreciative poems in response to particularly beautiful passages, to maintain the atmosphere of refined sensibility that makes Heian court culture unique in human history, a world where aesthetic sensitivity is valued above all other virtues, where the ability to compose an elegant poem is more important than military prowess or administrative skill. The music begins, the haunting sound of the kodo, its 13 strings producing melodies that seem to embody longing and loss, the deeper voice of the biwa, like a storyteller, the breathy flute that represents wind and spirit. Lady Murasaki listens with complete attention, her eyes half closed, her breathing synchronized with the music's rhythms. This is meditation, she understands, this complete immersion in beauty, this surrender of self to aesthetic experience. When the music concludes and the gathering disperses, Lady Murasaki returns to her chamber, her ladies helping her remove the elaborate robes, replacing them with a simpler sleeping garment. She performs her evening prayers before a small Buddhist altar, lighting incense, reciting sutras in Sanskrit that she has memorized but does not fully understand. The prayers are more about rhythm and intention than literal meaning, a way of connecting to powers beyond ordinary consciousness. Finally, she lies down on her sleeping platform, a frame strung with cords, covered with silk cushions and quilts. The autumn night is cool, and she pulls the quilts up to her chin, feeling the day's refinements settling into her body, into her mind. The life of a court lady is not physically difficult. Servants handle all practical tasks, but it requires constant vigilance, constant performance, constant attention to the subtle rules of behavior and taste that govern every interaction. Through the paper screens, she can see moonlight, soft and diffuse, transforming her chamber into a space of shadow and suggestion. She thinks about the poem she composed, about the gentleman who sent the verse that prompted it, about whether this exchange will lead somewhere or fade like so many other courtly flirtations. In the Heian world, love is primarily aesthetic, primarily a matter of poetry and letter writing rather than physical intimacy. The emotion is real, but it exists largely in imagination, in the space between what is said and what is meant. She thinks about the great literary work she has been reading, The Tale of Genji, written by an earlier court lady, also named Murasaki. The novel captures perfectly the world she inhabits, the subtle emotions, the complex relationships, the awareness of beauty and its transience that characterizes Heian's sensibility. Reading it, she sometimes cannot distinguish between the fictional world and her own life, so perfectly does the novel represent her experience. Sleep comes slowly, as it often does after evenings of stimulation and social interaction. When it finally arrives, it brings dreams of poetry and music, of moonlight and autumn leaves, of beauty so refined it borders on sadness, on the awareness that all things pass, that even this exquisite moment of aesthetic perfection is already fading, already becoming memory, already lost even as it is experienced. The dream is bittersweet, perfectly embodying mono no aware, the pathos of things that is the deepest wisdom of Japanese aesthetics, the understanding that beauty and sadness are inseparable, that to truly appreciate beauty is to feel the sadness of its passing. Section 5. Medieval Andalusia, Alchemist's Laboratory, 1100 CE. The evening light slants through the arched windows of the laboratory, illuminating motes of dust that float in the air like tiny spirits, casting long shadows from the alembics and retorts that cover every surface, the glassware and ceramic vessels that contain substances in various stages of transformation. In his workshop in the Scholars' Quarter of Córdoba, the alchemist Abdulmalik ibn Said adjusts the heat under a distillation apparatus, watching carefully as vapor rises from boiling liquid, condenses on the cooled surface above, and drips slowly into a receiving flask. The ancient process of separating volatile from fixed, pure from impure, the spiritual essence from material dross. Abdul Malik is 53 years old, his beard streaked with gray, his hands stained with the colors of his work, copper salts turning his fingernails green, silver compounds darkening his skin, the occupational marks of an alchemist. He has studied his craft for over 30 years, learning first from books, the works of Jabir ibn Hayyan, called Jibr by Latin scholars, the Persian master who systematized alchemical knowledge, and then through direct experimentation, through countless hours of heating and cooling, dissolving and crystallizing, observing the transformations of matter that reveal the underlying principles of creation itself. The laboratory is part of his house, a room set aside for the sacred work of transformation, both chemical and spiritual. For Abdul Malik understands, as all true alchemists do, that the work with substances is also work on the soul, that the purification of metals mirrors the purification of consciousness, that the search for the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance that transmutes base metals into gold and grants immortality, is also a search for spiritual perfection, for the transformation of ordinary human consciousness into something divine. The apparatus before him is distilling oil of vitriol, sulfuric acid, from green vitriol through careful heating. The process is dangerous. The fumes are corrosive, the heat must be precise, the glassware fragile. But Abdul Malik has performed this operation hundreds of times, knows exactly how to manage the temperature, when to expect the vapors to begin flowing, what color and consistency the final product should have. His knowledge comes not from theory alone, but from practice, from direct observation, from the patient accumulation of experience that is the only true teacher in alchemy. As the distillation proceeds, requiring only occasional attention, Abdul Malik sits at his desk and opens a large book bound in leather, its pages covered with his own handwriting, notes on experiments conducted, observations recorded, theories explored. This is his life's work, the accumulated knowledge of decades, the laboratory journal that will be his legacy to future alchemists if God wills it. Each page documents procedures, measurements, results, failures as well as successes. For alchemy advances through understanding what does not work as much as through discovering what does. He reviews his notes on the preparation of aqua regia, the royal water that can dissolve gold, that most noble and incorruptible of metals. The mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acids creates a substance more powerful than either alone, a principle Abdul Malik sees as emblematic of alchemy itself. That combination can produce properties not present in the components. That synthesis leads to emergence, that the whole is greater than the sum of parts. The laboratory is filled with the tools and materials of his craft, crucibles of various sizes for heating substances, cupels for assaying metals, and athanor, the self-feeding furnace that maintains steady heat for long operations, shelves holding hundreds of bottles and jars containing chemicals and minerals, herbs and animal substances, each labeled in his careful script. There are samples of cinnabar and realgar, galena and malachite, sulfur and mercury, salamoniac and borax, alum and vitriol. The material basis of transformation, each substance with its particular properties and powers. On another shelf are his books, precious beyond gold, manuscripts of Jabir and Rhazes, of Al-Razi and Al-Kindi, the great masters of Islamic alchemy. These texts are written in deliberately obscure language, using symbols and allegories to protect the sacred knowledge from the unworthy, to ensure that only the dedicated and intelligent can penetrate their meanings. Abdul Malik has spent years decoding these texts, understanding that the green lion devouring the sun refers to vitriol dissolving gold, that the philosophical mercury is not common quicksilver but something more subtle, a universal solvent that exists more as idea than as material substance. The work of alchemy requires patience above all other virtues, Abdul Malik reflects. Transformations cannot be rushed. Each substance has its own timing, its own process of maturation. The alchemist must learn to work with natural rhythms, not against them, must understand that forcing leads to failure, that gentle persistence achieves what violence cannot. This lesson applies not just to chemical operations, but to spiritual development as well. The soul cannot be forced into perfection, but must be gradually refined through patient practice, through the slow work of removing impurities and cultivating virtues. As evening deepens, Abdul Malik checks his distillation apparatus. The collection flask is now half full of clear liquid, the purified essence of vitriol. He extinguishes the flame beneath the boiling flask and allows the apparatus to cool slowly. Rapid cooling can crack the glassware, waste the product, require beginning again. Everything in alchemy must be done with care and attention. He seals the flask containing the distilled acid, labels it with date and contents, and stores it in the cabinet where such dangerous substances are kept under lock. The laboratory must be left in order, all flames extinguished, all volatile materials properly stored. The work is never truly finished, but it can be suspended, returned to tomorrow with fresh eyes and renewed attention. Abdul Malik leaves the laboratory and enters the courtyard of his house, where a fountain splashes peacefully, where orange trees grow, their blossoms filling the evening air with sweetness. His wife has prepared the evening meal, and they eat together in the Andalusian style, dates and olives, flatbread and hummus, lamb cooked with spices, rice flavored with saffron. They speak little. Their long marriage has progressed beyond the need for constant conversation, but the silence is comfortable, companionable. After eating, Abdul Malik retires to his study for evening prayers, the Maghrib Salat that marks the sunset. He performs the ritual ablutions, spreads his prayer rug facing Mecca, and surrenders himself to the prescribed movements and recitations. The prayers are a different kind of transformation, he understands, a purification of consciousness through submission to divine will, through the regular practice of acknowledging that humans are creatures, not creators, that all power and knowledge come ultimately from Allah. Prayers complete, he sits for a time in meditation, a practice he has learned from Sufi teachers who understand that alchemy and mysticism are two paths toward the same goal, the transformation of consciousness, the realization of unity with divine reality. In meditation, Abdul Malik experiences directly what his alchemical work symbolizes: the dissolution of the false self, the purification of awareness, the gradual emergence of something pure and indestructible, the philosopher's stone of awakened consciousness. The night is warm, fragrant with jasmine and orange blossoms, alive with the sounds of Cordoba settling into evening. Distant music, voices and conversation, the call of the night watch, the eternal murmur of the city. Abdul Malik feels grateful for his life, for the opportunity to pursue knowledge, for living in a time and place where Islamic civilization has reached heights of sophistication and learning unmatched anywhere in the world. Cordoba is a city of libraries and universities, of mosques and palaces, of scholars from across the Islamic world and beyond, Christians and Jews studying alongside Muslims, all contributing to the great project of preserving and expanding human knowledge. Finally, he retires to his sleeping chamber, a simple room cooled by thick walls, furnished with a low bed and a few necessities. He lies down, pulling a light sheet over his body, feeling the day's concentration settling into pleasant tiredness. The work of the alchemist is primarily mental: the constant attention, the careful observation, the thinking through of processes and transformations. This mental work is as exhausting in its way as physical labor, requiring rest and renewal. Through the window, he can see stars beginning to appear in the deepening sky. He thinks about the connection between celestial and terrestrial, between the movements of planets and the processes occurring in his laboratory. The alchemists believe that all things are connected, that the patterns visible in the heavens are reflected in earthly substances, that understanding one level of reality provides keys to understanding other levels. As above, so below, the fundamental axiom of Hermetic philosophy that underlies all alchemical work. Sleep comes gradually, bringing dreams of transformation, of lead turning to gold, of mercury fixing into silver, of the elusive philosopher's stone finally crystallizing from solution, red and perfect, containing within itself all the powers of transmutation. But these dreams are not merely about material transformation. They are about the soul's journey toward perfection, about the gradual refinement of consciousness through the removal of impurities, about the patient work of spiritual development that parallels the patient work of chemical transformation. The dream is purposeful, mystical, reflecting Abdul Malik's understanding that his life's work is ultimately about serving God through the study of creation, through the attempt to understand the principles by which Allah brought the world into being and sustains it in existence. Section 6. Khmer Empire, Temple Dancer, 1150 CE. The heat of the Cambodian afternoon is finally breaking as evening approaches, the fierce sun descending toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the vast temple complex of Angkor Wat. In a chamber within the temple compound, a young woman named Devata, her name means goddess or celestial dancer, completes her final rehearsal of the day, her body moving through the intricate gestures and postures of classical Khmer dance, each movement precise and symbolic, each hand position conveying specific meanings drawn from Hindu mythology and Buddhist philosophy. Devata is 19 years old, slender and graceful, trained since childhood in the sacred art of temple dancing. She is one of hundreds of dancers who serve at Angkor Wat, performing during religious ceremonies, embodying in their movements the apsaras, the celestial dancers of Hindu mythology who entertain the gods and heroes. The dancers are not merely entertainers, but are themselves considered semi-divine. Their performance is an act of worship, their trained bodies instruments through which divine stories are told and cosmic principles are manifested. The rehearsal chamber where she practices is open on three sides to catch any breeze, its floor polished stone, its walls decorated with carved reliefs showing apsaras in various dance poses, eternal reminders of the tradition she embodies. A small altar in one corner holds offerings of flowers and incense, honoring the gods and asking for their blessing on the dancer's work. The chamber smells of frangipani and sandalwood, of the coconut oil used to dress the dancer's hair, of the jasmine garlands worn during performances. Devada's dance teacher, an elderly woman who was herself a renowned dancer before age slowed her movements, watches critically, occasionally correcting a hand position, adjusting the angle of a foot, reminding Devada to keep her face serene even while her body performs complex movements. The face must show nothing, the teacher says. The body tells the story. The face shows divine detachment, the peace beyond human emotion. The dance Devada has been rehearsing tells the story of the churning of the ocean of milk, one of the great myths of Hindu cosmology. In this story, gods and demons cooperate to churn the cosmic ocean, seeking the elixir of immortality. From the churning emerge wonderful treasures, including the apsaras themselves, born from the foam and spray, dancing in celebration of creation. Devada must embody this primordial dance, must show through movement the emergence of beauty from chaos, of order from disorder, of divine grace manifesting in material form. Each gesture has specific meaning, codified over centuries. This hand position represents a lotus flower, that one a bird in flight, another the crown of a deity. The movements of the feet trace sacred patterns on the floor, invisible geometries that connect earth to heaven. The dance is simultaneously devotional and aesthetic, spiritual and artistic, serving both gods and human audiences, existing in the liminal space between entertainment and worship. As the rehearsal concludes, Devada and the other dancers retire to the bathing area, washing away the day's exertion in cool water drawn from the temple's extensive water system. Angkor Wat is surrounded by vast reservoirs and canals, hydraulic engineering on a scale that rivals anything achieved by any civilization. The water is not merely practical but sacred, representing the cosmic ocean, connecting the temple to the primordial waters from which creation emerged. After bathing, the dancers dress in fresh silk garments, assist each other with the elaborate coiffures that temple dancers wear, apply sandalwood paste to their faces and arms, transforming themselves from ordinary women into celestial beings. Tonight, there will be a ceremony honoring Vishnu, the preserver god to whom Angkor Wat is dedicated, and the dancers will perform, their movements accompanied by the gamelan orchestra, bronze gongs and xylophones, drums and cymbals, creating music that seems to come from another world. As evening settles over the temple complex, the dancers gather in the main sanctuary for prayers before their performance. They prostrate themselves before the massive statue of Vishnu, offering flowers and incense, reciting Sanskrit mantras that most of them do not understand but know are powerful, efficacious, connecting them to the divine presence they will soon embody through dance. The ceremony begins as darkness falls, the temple illuminated by thousands of oil lamps, their flames creating a golden world that seems suspended between earth and sky. The smell of incense is overwhelming. The sound of chanting fills the air, and the dancers take their positions. When the music begins, Devada feels herself transforming, her ordinary consciousness dissolving as the Apsara consciousness emerges. She is no longer herself, but something timeless, universal, a channel through which divine energy flows into visible manifestation. The dance proceeds in perfect synchronization, dozens of dancers moving as one organism, their bodies creating living sculptures, frozen moments of perfect grace, then flowing into new configurations. The audience, priests and nobles, common people allowed to glimpse this sacred spectacle, watches in silent reverence, understanding that what they see is not merely performance, but ritual, not entertainment, but worship made visible. When the dance concludes and the dancers withdraw, Devada feels both exhilarated and exhausted, the adrenaline of performance gradually fading, leaving behind a pleasant tiredness. She removes her ceremonial costume, washes again, dresses in a simple sleeping garment. The dancers sleep in a dormitory within the temple compound, a large hall lined with sleeping platforms, where they are sequestered from ordinary life, dedicated entirely to their sacred art. Devada lies down on her platform, covered with a thin cotton sheet, feeling the stone beneath still warm from the day's heat. Through the open sides of the dormitory, she can see the temple towers silhouetted against the star-filled sky, can hear the night sounds of the jungle surrounding Angkor, insects and frogs, distant animals, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. She thinks about the dance, about the mythology it embodied, about her role as a living link between human and divine realms. This is her purpose, she believes, her dharma, the particular duty assigned to her by fate and karma, by the cosmic order that determines each being's place and function. To dance is not a choice but a calling, not a profession but a sacred obligation, fulfilling her part in the great cosmic drama. She thinks about the apsaras carved into the temple walls, hundreds of them in various poses, frozen in stone but alive in spirit. Someday, perhaps, her own image will be carved, immortalizing a particular gesture or expression, becoming part of the temple's permanent beauty. But even if not, she will have served the gods through her dancing, will have contributed beauty to the world, will have fulfilled her dharma. Sleep comes easily after the day's exertion, bringing dreams of dancing that continues beyond exhaustion, beyond physical limitation, her body becoming light as air, rising from the temple floor, joining the celestial apsaras who dance eternally in the heavens, entertaining the gods, celebrating existence itself. The dream is joyful, transcendent, a vision of the divine realm where dance never ceases, where beauty and grace are eternal, where her true self exists beyond the limitations of mortal flesh. Section 7. Ottoman Empire, Master Calligrapher, 1550 CE. The golden light of late afternoon floods the calligrapher's workshop in the heart of Istanbul, illuminating the pages spread across his desk, each one covered with Arabic script so perfect it seems more divine than human, each letter formed according to principles of proportion and balance that have been refined over centuries of Islamic artistic tradition. Hassan al-Karahisari, one of the greatest calligraphers of his age, sets down his reed pen and flexes his fingers, feeling the pleasant ache that comes from hours of intense concentration, of holding the pen at exactly the right angle, of maintaining the perfect balance between control and fluidity that produces script of transcendent beauty. Hassan is 47 years old, his reputation established throughout the Ottoman Empire and beyond, his work commissioned by sultans and viziers, by wealthy merchants seeking beautiful Quran manuscripts, by poets wanting their verses immortalized in elegant script. He has devoted his life to the art of beautiful writing, understanding it not merely as a craft, but as a spiritual discipline, a form of worship, a way of serving God by creating beauty that reflects divine perfection. The workshop is spacious and well lit, located in a building near the Suleymani Mosque, the magnificent complex built by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. High windows face north, providing steady light without direct sun that would make colors difficult to judge. The walls are hung with examples of fine calligraphy, works by earlier masters whose perfection Hassan studies constantly, works by his own students showing their progress, his own pieces that he judges not quite perfect, but close enough to serve as teaching examples. The desk where he works is low, requiring him to sit cross-legged or kneel, a position that promotes the correct posture for calligraphy, spine straight, arm free to move from the shoulder, wrist and fingers controlling the fine movements that distinguish great calligraphy from merely competent writing. The desk holds his tools, reed pens of various widths, each one cut by his own hand to precise specifications, ceramic inkwells containing ink made from lamp black and gum Arabic, mixed to exactly the right consistency, sheets of paper burnished to a smooth finish that receives ink without feathering, a ruler and compass for planning layouts, a small knife for scraping away errors. The page before him is part of a Quran manuscript he has been working on for 3 years, a commission from a wealthy patron who wants a copy of the holy book worthy of its sacred contents. Hassan is using the Thuluth script, one of the 6 classical styles of Arabic calligraphy, characterized by its curved elegance, its thick downstrokes and thin horizontals, its letter forms that seem to flow like water, like wind, like the breath of God speaking the words that created and sustained the universe. Each letter is a meditation, Hassan reflects. The aleph, a single vertical stroke, represents divine unity, the the one from which all multiplicity derives. The BA and its sister letters, with their horizontal bases and single dots, represent the manifestation of unity into diversity. The Lam Aleph ligature, combining these two letters into a form of extraordinary grace, symbolizes the relationship between transcendent and immanent, between God and creation. Calligraphy, in Islamic tradition, is the highest of visual arts precisely because it makes visible the word of God, transforms divine speech into visual form without representing God directly. For Islam forbids making images of the divine or of the prophet. But the written word, especially when executed with supreme skill and devotion, becomes itself a form of divine presence, a way of encountering the sacred through beauty that is both intellectual and sensory. As the light begins to fade, Hassan sets aside the Quran manuscript. This sacred work must be done in optimal light, must not be rushed or executed with tired eyes, and turns to a different project, a tugra, the ornate calligraphic emblem that serves as the Sultan's signature, a virtuoso display of interlacing letters that functions both as text and as abstract design. The tugra he is creating is for an imperial decree, and it must be perfect, must embody in its complex beauty the authority and magnificence of the Sultan himself. The work of creating a tugra requires absolute concentration, for the letters must be precisely proportioned, their interlacing must be mathematically correct, the whole must balance despite its apparent asymmetry. Hassan has created hundreds of tugras, yet each one demands his complete attention, allows no lapse into habit or complacency. This is the discipline of mastery. He understands that excellence requires constant vigilance, that skill must be renewed in each moment, that perfection is not a state achieved once, but a standard that must be met fresh each time. An apprentice enters to light the oil lamps as twilight deepens. Hassan has taken on several students, young men who show promise, who possess the patience and dedication that calligraphy requires. He teaches them as he was taught, through observation and practice, through copying the works of masters, through the gradual internalization of proportions and rhythms that eventually become instinctive, allowing the hand to produce beauty without conscious thought. But that mastery takes years, decades. Hassan remembers his own apprenticeship, the countless hours copying basic letter forms, the frustration when his work failed to match his master's perfection, the gradual dawning of understanding that transformed mechanical copying into creative expression. Now his own students experience that same journey, and he guides them with patience and high standards, knowing that only through demanding discipline does true excellence emerge. As evening settles over Istanbul, Hassan performs his evening prayers, the Maghrib Salat, spreading his prayer rug on the workshop floor, prostrating himself toward Mecca. The prayers are themselves a kind of calligraphy. He reflects, the body writing submission and devotion in space, moving through prescribed forms with the same attention to beauty and precision that he brings to his written work. Prayers complete, he walks through the streets of Istanbul toward his home in the calligrapher's quarter. The city is magnificent in the evening light, its domes and minarets silhouetted against the sky, the Bosphorus visible in the distance, dividing Europe from Asia, marking Istanbul's unique position between worlds. The city hums with life, markets still busy, people gathering in coffee houses to drink the new beverage from Yemen that is becoming fashionable, musicians playing in the street, the eternal urban symphony of human activity. His home is modest but comfortable, typical of a successful artisan. His wife greets him warmly, and they share the evening meal with their children and grandchildren. He is blessed with a large family, 3 sons and 2 daughters, all married, all contributing to the household's prosperity. The meal is leisurely, filled with conversation and laughter, a sharp contrast to the silent concentration of his working hours. After eating, Hassan retires to a small room where he keeps his personal library and his private work, experiments in new letter forms, practice sheets, copies of historical manuscripts that he studies for inspiration. He sits for a time, simply looking at beautiful calligraphy, allowing his eyes to rest on forms that embody perfection, that remind him of the standards he aspires to maintain. Finally, he retires to his sleeping chamber, a room cooled by lattice screens that allow breeze, but not unwanted eyes. furnished simply with a low platform covered in carpets and cushions. He lies down, feeling the day's concentration settling into his shoulders, his hand, his eyes. The work of calligraphy is demanding, requiring physical stamina as well as mental focus, but it is deeply satisfying, offering the reward of creating beauty, of serving God through art. Through the window, he can hear the city quieting, the night watchmen beginning their rounds, the distant sound of someone practicing the ney flute. He thinks about the Quran manuscript he is creating, about the thousands of words remaining to be written, about the years of work ahead before the project is complete. But he does not feel burdened by this. The work is itself the reward, each letter an opportunity to approach perfection, each page a form of worship. Sleep comes gently, bringing dreams of letters that become birds taking flight, that become vines growing and intertwining, that become rivers flowing toward the sea of divine unity from which all forms emerge and to which all forms return. The dream is peaceful, meditative, reflecting Hassan's understanding that calligraphy is not merely decoration but a path to the divine, a way of making visible the invisible, of bringing order and beauty into the world as an act of devotion and service. Section 8. Closing meditation and the final breath. And so, beloved traveler, we complete another journey through history's quiet hours, another circuit through the lives of people who found meaning in daily practice, in patient craft, in the evening satisfaction of work well done. We have stood beside bakers and druids, poets and alchemists, dancers and calligraphers, witnessing their devotion to their crafts, their dedication to excellence, their understanding that work itself can be a form of prayer, a way of serving something greater than individual existence. Feel yourself now sinking even deeper into rest, so deeply relaxed that you can barely feel your body anymore, so completely at peace that the boundary between yourself and the world has become thin, permeable, almost transparent. Your breathing is so slow now, so subtle, that each breath seems to last forever, each exhalation releasing more and more of what you no longer need to carry. Your face is completely smooth and soft, all expression dissolved, peaceful as the surface of still water reflecting an empty sky. Your eyes are closed and motionless, the lids heavy as earth, still as stone. Your jaw hangs loose, your tongue rests quietly. Your whole head feels both infinitely heavy and weightless at once, a paradox that makes perfect sense in this threshold space between waking and sleeping. The people we visited tonight understood something profound about the relationship between work and rest, between effort and surrender, between doing and being. The baker knew that bread must be made with care, but then released to nourish others. The druid understood that knowledge must be held carefully, but also transmitted freely. The court lady recognized that beauty exists in the fleeting moment and must be appreciated even as it passes. The alchemist learned that transformation cannot be forced but only facilitated. The dancer discovered that perfection comes through surrender to something larger than self. The calligrapher found that divine beauty emerges through human discipline and devotion. You, too, can carry these wisdoms into your sleep, can release the need to control and force, can trust the natural processes that restore and renew, can surrender to the mysterious intelligence that lives in your body and knows how to heal, how to restore, how to prepare you for another day of living and learning and growing. Let go now of everything we have said, everything we have witnessed, everything you have thought or felt during this journey. Let all of it dissolve like mist dissolving in morning sun, like salt dissolving in water, leaving nothing behind but a quality, a feeling, a deep sense of peace and rightness. Your breathing continues automatically, requiring no attention, no effort. Your heartbeat maintains its faithful rhythm, that ancient drum that has been playing since before you were born, that will play until your final moment, marking time, measuring life in pulses that connect you to all living things that have ever been or will ever be. The craftspeople we visited tonight created beauty that outlasted them, bread that nourished bodies, traditions that sustained cultures, poems that touched hearts, substances that transformed, dances that elevated consciousness, calligraphy that made divine beauty visible. But none of this beauty would exist without rest, without the daily renewal that sleep provides. without the surrender of consciousness that allows the deep self to do its mysterious work of integration and preparation. Trust that work now. Trust the deep self that knows what you need, that works through the night while your conscious mind rests, that processes experiences and consolidates memories, that repairs tissues and balances systems, that does 1,000 things you will never consciously know about, but which are essential to your continued existence and flourishing. You are so deeply relaxed now that you might not be entirely sure whether you are still awake or have already crossed the threshold into sleep. This uncertainty is perfect. This not knowing is exactly where you should be. This liminal space where consciousness becomes dream, where self dissolves into the larger patterns that contain and sustain all individual selves. Good night, dear one. Good night to all the bakers and druids, poets and alchemists, dancers and calligraphers who have shared their evenings with us. Good night to all beings visible and invisible, mortal and immortal, actual and possible. Good night to the earth beneath you, the air around you, the sky above you, to all the elements that constitute your body and the world. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep completely. The journey is finished. You have arrived at your destination. There is only this, the soft darkness, the deep peace, the infinite stillness that holds all things, that has held all things since before time began, that will hold all things after time ends, if time ends, if these words even mean anything beyond the thinking mind's need to grasp and comprehend. Rest in that holding now. Rest in that peace. Rest in the eternal arms that have cradled every being that has ever lived, that cradle you now in this moment, that will cradle you always, in life and in death, and in whatever mystery lies beyond both. Sleep. Silence. All words cease. All thoughts dissolve. All boundaries disappear. There is only the vast, luminous darkness that is both everything and nothing, both presence and absence, both being and non-being. There is only sleep, deep and dreamless, the blessed emptiness from which all things arise and to which all things return, the eternal source and ground of existence itself. Rest now, beloved. Rest completely. Rest forever in this moment that is all moments, this breath that is all breaths, this peace that passeth understanding, this darkness that is also light, this emptiness that is also fullness, this nothing that is everything. Good night. Sleep well. Dream sweetly, until morning calls you back to the world of names and forms. Rest here in the nameless, formless void that is your true home, your original nature, your deepest self. Sleep.